and the Malian Armed Forces continue to gain strength. Yesterday, Saturday, a major terrorist leader named Abou Bakar Ibrahim, commonly known as Ouel, and 10 members of his group surrendered to the FAMas with weapons and ammunition.
They were promised paradise, but what they found was nothing more than lies. For years, the deserts and valleys of Mali have echoed with gunfire, and the hopes of a generation have been buried beneath extremist propaganda. But now, something is shifting. In a quiet, powerful moment that escaped the headlines, 11 men stepped away from war and walked back into the light. On Saturday, June 28, 2025, in the Gao region of Mali, 11 fighters from the so-called Islamic State in the Greater Sahara surrendered to the Malian Armed Forces. They were not captured. They were not hunted down. They came of their own free will, tired, disillusioned, and ready to speak the truth. Among them was Abou Bakar Ibrahim, known in the region by the alias Ouel or Doubel. Once feared as a commander of armed terrorist groups operating around the Site area, he is now remembered for something else, for laying down his weapon and urging others to do the same. They came bearing more than just rifles. These men brought back 10 firearms, 12 fully loaded magazines, and several motorcycles, tools once used in violent missions, now handed over as tokens of peace. But more than weapons, they brought stories, they brought warnings, and they brought a message that resonates across the Sahel. They were lied to. "I came back because I am Malian," said Ouel. His voice was clear, steady, and filled with a calm resolve. At first, a confession is worth more than any battlefield victory. It is a crack in the wall of silence that has allowed extremism to grow. A leader, once a recruiter, now turning his back on the very system he helped build. The impact is seismic. This isn't just about one man or one group. It's about the power of truth. For years, young men like Ouel were drawn into extremist networks, not by hatred, but by hunger. Hunger for meaning, for identity, for escape from poverty and neglect. The state was absent, hope was scarce, and so they followed those who offered structure, community, and a distorted sense of purpose. Now, that illusion is crumbling. The surrender in Ansongo, though small in number, represents a significant shift. It shows that the Malian Armed Forces, known as FAMa, are not only winning battles on the ground, but also winning hearts. These fighters did not come in chains. They were not dragged through villages as trophies. They were received with dignity. The FAMa made it clear that their rights would be respected and their lives protected. In a public statement, the General Staff emphasized that the security and physical well-being of the surrendering fighters would be fully guaranteed. That is not just a military decision, it is a moral one. It's a message to the world that Mali will lead its own path to peace with justice and humanity. This new approach stands in sharp contrast to the strategies of the past, where death was the only outcome for insurgents. But Africa is changing. In Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, a new generation of leadership is emerging. Men like Captain Ibrahim Traoré understand that this war is not just fought with guns, but with ideas. They know that the battle for peace begins in the hearts of those who once picked up arms. What makes this moment even more powerful is the testimony of the fighters themselves. Ouel didn't just surrender. He made a call. To those still hiding in the forests and deserts, to the ones too afraid to come home, he said, "We are all Malians. It's not a problem. We have been treated well since we arrived." That message carries more weight than any speech from a politician. It is raw, authentic, and comes from a place of lived experience. If even one fighter hears those words and decides to lay down their weapon, that's a victory. And yet, this is just the beginning. What happens after the surrender matters just as much. Reintegration is complex. These men must be held accountable for any crimes they've committed, but they must also be given a path forward, a path back into society, a path toward redemption. Because if we do not offer that, then we are simply creating the conditions for the cycle of violence to begin again. Africa cannot afford to make that mistake. For too long, foreign powers have dictated how we manage our conflicts, treating symptoms without addressing the roots. But the time for dependency is over. We must invest in our own systems of justice, rehabilitation, and reconciliation. We must tell our own stories, and we must remember that every man who walks away from war is not just a deserter, but potentially a healer. To all those who have supported this platform, thank you. You are part of a growing community that refuses to let Africa's truth be buried. Your views, your shares, your voices, they matter. If you believe in this work, consider supporting us with a super thanks or becoming a member. Every gesture of support helps us keep amplifying voices like Ouel's, voices that the mainstream ignores. What happened in Gao might not make the front page of international newspapers, but for Mali and for the continent, it is a beacon, a sign that peace is not a fantasy, that even the most hardened fighters can return home, that dignity and humanity can be tools of war, more powerful than bombs and bullets. Ouel and his men remind us of a simple truth. It's not too late. For those still trapped in the lies of extremism, there is still a way out. There is still a home to return to. There is still a future worth fighting for, not with weapons, but with unity, truth, and justice. Africa is waking up, not with rage, but with clarity, not with revenge, but with vision. And as her sons return from the shadows, we must be ready, not to punish them endlessly, but to help them find a new role, one where they no longer destroy, but rebuild. Let the world watch. Let them doubt. Let them scoff. But we know what's happening. We know that something is changing. The winds are shifting, and the same desert that once swallowed dreams is now giving birth to something rare: hope. If you believe in this story, don't just move on. Share it. Speak it. Let it spread. Because the war in the Sahel will not be won with silence. It will be won with truth. And truth, at long last, is finding its voice.